So if you have a glass of water or a bottle, please raise it. Okay, we waited for a while, now we can hydrate. So this is probably what your users are facing every time you use server-side rendering with React. I'm going to talk about that. My name is Noam. My name is Noam. I'm currently freelance working on Chromium and on standards, mainly web performance related standards like resource timing, pen timing. Now, what is the twilight zone, which I'm going to speak about? I don't live in Tel Aviv. I live an hour to 2 hours north of here, depending on traffic. And when I'm here, I stay at my dad's house because he lives in Tel Aviv. And he asked me, what is my talk about? He's not a developer. And I asked him, do you know that feeling when you load a website, it seems to be loaded, but you start clicking on things and nothing happens, and it feels a little bit weird, and you're not sure, is the website loaded or not loaded? Do I need to refresh? And he said, yeah, sure, I know this problem. So if my dad knows this problem, your users definitely do. Now, a brief history of how did we get here. Let's try to keep it brief. So in the 90s, we had servers and forms. Like we had what we call today multi-page applications. We had very thin clients, web pages. You filled in a form, you click submit, you waited, and a new HTML page would come. My mom recently had to come to my wedding in England. She had the same experience trying to get her passport renewed. You send in the forms, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait. And in the end, you have to go to the airport and pay lots of money. So everyone in 1999, too much bureaucracy, too much sending forms, waiting for them, waiting for the HTML to reload. That's where everybody was at in 1999. I was already a web developer at that time, and our designers didn't like all this waiting, so we did everything by having an invisible iframe and loading things into the invisible iframe and using JavaScript to change things in the parent page. That picture is kind of what it felt like. Then came the 2000s. We had Ajax, XML HTTP request. This is actually the official logo of XML HTTP request. Yep. Everybody was using jQuery. Things became nicer to develop JavaScript, relatively speaking. And towards the middle end of the 2000s, two new things came to us together. One is the iPhone. People started being shocked that they can actually do a nice experience on the web, on mobile, and HTML5 that came together with the iPhone, somewhat by accident. So that canvas, video, CSS animations, all that came together with the first iPhone. So I was working at Nokia at the time. In 2009, everyone, almost, the web is too slow for mobile, apps are the future. Everybody was doing app stores, everybody had heated discussions about native versus web. I felt aggravated about this. I felt if the web is slow, let's make it faster instead of giving Apple and Google all the control over app stores. Let's see what's happening there. So in 2009, I joined WebKit and started tinkering around with that code. I didn't know anything about it, to see how to improve things in there, and that's how I got to browser development. In the 2010s, we had it was the golden era of frameworks. We had Angular, and then AngularJS, then React, and then Vue. Everybody loved writing those apps, and they grew, and they grew, and they grew, and they grew. And it was mostly a happy time for having an application that has nothing but a render, like an empty shell with render JavaScript. But there was a tipping point in 2016. You can think for a second what it was. It was specifically in October 2016, there was a big tipping point in our industry. I bungee jumped, I faced my fear of heights. That was a literal tipping point for me. But the web industry did not care about this, only I cared about this. As you can see, I'm totally petrified in there. What happened in 2016? There were more mobile web users than desktop. That happened in 2016, October. It was like, you can see the graphs online, just Google it. After that time, people could not underestimate the mobile web anymore as something that only goes to app or to very simple content. People started caring about loading performance and about people with slow networks. People could not underestimate this anymore. Funny enough, at that time, I was heading the mobile web little team at Wix. And I was at the front lines of trying to solve this problem for a Wix user by switching to a new and newish and very hyped next generation technology, which was React server-side rendering. I actually don't like calling it server-side rendering because it kind of misses the point sometimes. I like to call it two-pass rendering. You actually render twice. You render on the server side, and then you render on the client side. There's a lot of waste in it when you think about it. But actually, this also does not tell the whole story, especially if you're in mobile. And we started doing server-side rendering, a lot of us, because of the mobile tipping point in 2006 and that trend. It's actually sort of a three-pass, or you render on the server, and then your user waits for it, waits for it, waits for it. There's a great song, Wait For It, in the Hamilton musical. I really recommend the Hamilton musical. I watched it like 10 times, I think. But anyway, this is the experience you're giving to users with server-side rendering. Let's go a little bit to the internals of it, of two-pass rendering. We actually, on the server, we load dependencies. If we're optimized, we probably do it only once per server. We generate a virtual DOM. If you want to know what the virtual DOM is, type React render and see what comes up in the console. You'll see like those big objects with their props and things. It's like an actual data structure. It's not some magic. You can see what it is. Then we generate the actual DOM and we serialize it to a string. Then what was before waits for it is the user loading dependencies, loading a bunch of stuff. And then in the client, we generate a virtual DOM again, because we threw it away. And then we do something very important, which is to connect the listeners. Only when we have the virtual DOM ready, we know which elements require the listeners, the on-clicks and all that. So only after we did all this stuff, we can connect the listeners. And this is why interaction feels like it's only coming after this time. So everybody now, or in 2020, too long until iteration, somebody in the industry, please save us. How do we do this? Now, what does our industry do when there's a problem? A whole bunch of solutions and alternatives and colorful logos. Now, I'm not here to tell you to use or to not use any of the solutions because I don't have enough track record with them. Some of them are very innovative and really solve problems in specific ways. I'm not here to to teach you how to use them or to tell you that they don't work or etc. But I can give you this quote by Karl Popper. Karl Popper is a philosopher of science. He was one of the fathers of the scientific methods. Every solution of a problem raises new unsolved problems. I encountered this a lot in my career. There's a problem, I bring a new framework with a cool logo at it, port all my app to it, like go a whole bunch of miles, convince our manager that this is the next good things and it will help us hire people who want the next hype. And in the end, it raises problems that currently I don't understand. I don't know yet. This is new. It's a bet. Nothing wrong with making bets, but know that you're making bets when you're using new technologies. It's all good. But I'm not here for that. My question is, what if all solutions could help with new problems? That's my line of thinking with this presentation. As you saw, I've been building websites since 1999, so old thinking suits me. Okay, let's start with form validations. Can everybody see the top corner? Okay, we have a little username input. It needs to be max 10 characters, no funny characters. Doesn't matter what the definition it is. And we want the invalid username red thingy to appear only when it's an invalid username. Great. This is what a React bootcamp would teach you to do. You have username, set username as some sort of use state. You have invalid that derives from that state. If you spent enough time in the bootcamps, they'll teach you to maybe do this with a use memo or something like that. Now, all this is fine and dandy, but we have the onChange on the input element. When we have onChange, it's an input handler. What did we learn about input handlers? They only work after iteration. So if your user starts typing and it's wrong, they would only know that after you loaded all the dependencies and hydrated. Now, how does this relate to Bauhaus? Bauhaus is an architecture in Tel Aviv that was prevalent in early 20th century, 1910s, etc. This is the Bauhaus Museum, if you're a visitor here. Why am I mentioning Bauhaus? Bauhaus is my first principle at looking at problems. Oh, it's too much, not good contrast here, but this is from the principles of Bauhaus. An object is defined by its nature. In order then to design it to function correctly, a container, a chair, or a house, one must first of all study its nature. It must fulfill its function usefully, be durable, economical, and beautiful. So build houses that are supposed to be houses. Use your materials in the way they're meant to be. That's the principle of Bauhaus. So the nature of your materials in HTML, in the web, and this guides me a lot when I develop for the web. Let forms be forms. Let links be links. Let HTML and CSS do what HTML and CSS do. These are your materials. React is a tool, but these are your materials. Now, let's go back to our little sign-in. We're going to use, I'm actually in love with all the little things you can do with forms and inputs. Be curious, go to MDN, look at the input element and at the form element and be like, what does this attribute do? I didn't know about this attribute, let's see what it does. That's how I learn all this stuff. Plus working on the HTML spec, but a lot of it I actually learned from, earlier than that, I learned a lot from MDN. So we have an input with a pattern. You can put a regex on the input element without needing to do that in React. You can put a max length on it. And if it's invalid or valid, you have a pseudo class. So I can show the label, the error label, Only in case there's an actual error. This would work prior to iteration. If you do not have CSSophobia, which a lot of front-end developers I encountered have, go for it. If you do have CSSophobia, go bungee jumping. It's scarier than CSS. Okay, next. This was actually my first task when I joined Wix several years ago, was to revamp the little hamburger menu. You see that everybody knows the hamburger menu. You click on something that doesn't look like a hamburger, and then it's more like a veggie burger with 3 buns or something. Anyway, the menu opens, you click on it again, the menu closes. Again, this is how this code usually looks like. Use state, is open, set open. Now, when you look at this code, it should pop to your eyes that the user would only be able to open the hamburger menu after the twilight zone. It should be obvious from looking at this code. You have onClick and you have use state. Then they connect with each other. They just wouldn't work until you hydrate. Easy to write in React, not always good for your users. Now, there is a solution to this problem that is actually very well known in the industry and used a lot, which is to use a checkbox. A lot of people use this, this is known. You make the hamburger menu into a checkbox, and when it's checked, that's when you show the actual menu. Will work before iteration, great. I have nothing against this problem. But there's actually a solution that I like better. And I didn't see it used much on the web. I hope it's more in use or that people will come up with why it's bad. Details and summary. Details is a not so new HTML element that it has one function. It has an internal summary element, and everything else is hidden until you click the summary, and it gets hidden again when you click the summary again. That's what details and summary do. Sounds familiar? That's exactly a hamburger menu. So this works for a hamburger menu. The nice thing about it, it's less code, and you don't have to create behaviors in CSS. The behaviors are in your HTML, ready-made, and all you have to do is style it in the way that you want. So third one is tabs. So tabs are kind of similar to the hamburger menu. You have the same whole button contact, but this time whatever is in the main needs to change based on your tab. Familiar, right? Current tab, select tab, in use state. You see how I'm repeating myself? There's always a use state with an onClick. Sorry to bore you, but it's not about boring you, it's about recognizing patterns. This pattern appears a lot in your code and it's causing the twilight zone. React is not causing the twilight zone. This pattern is. And there's always alternatives. So, something new in the web platform. See, I'm not only about old stuff, I'm also about new stuff. Yay. Is the has selector in CSS. Today it's in Chrome. Or yesterday. It was in Safari for a while. And sometimes Safari are first despite the trouble people give them. I love the has selector. So this is a tab selector with no JavaScript. So instead of checkboxes, we use radio buttons. Like imagine your tabs as radio buttons. There's not that much different. Radios are already kind of a switch case kind of state in the browser. And we use the has selector. We say that if the nav has a checked radio that is home, we show the home, etc., etc. Now, it's different from the React approach because we render all the different sections. However, knowing a bit about browser internals, this is pretty cheap when the element has display none. Elements with display none do not have a lot of overhead. The browser simply ignores them in many ways. So many times, instead of trying to decide in React with this kind of code, what to render and what to not render, leave this work to CSS. It's not a bad thing. CSSophobia is something to overcome. Yeah. Yay, applause. So, Bauhaus, use HTML and CSS when available, be curious about materials. Now, this is something you cannot do with HTML and CSS, or I didn't find a way to do that. You have your task list, and above them you have a little tick mark that when you click it, it's a select all. It selects all the tick mark, etc. For this, usually in React, you would have some sort of an on-click on the select all. And if you wanted to do it with the checkboxes, you have to have a bunch of use refs and crazy stuff. Now, I'm going to use a hack called vanilla flavored bubbles. It doesn't taste good. That's why I call it that. So we tend to think about those events that we didn't connect yet because of the twilight zone as something that just disappears, but it doesn't actually disappear. Those events bubble up and bubble up and bubble up until they reach your document in your window. But before that, they get to your uproot element, the place where you did React render. So this is a place where you can catch lost bubbles and do stuff with them. Now, don't do this a lot. It's a hack. It's a fallback. I think one place where it's really legit to do this is for BI. Is to say, to tell your backend, oh, somebody tried to navigate to something where, and nothing happened. However, what I liked about it is that it looks like a fallback. Sometimes when you write a fallback, it's nice that it doesn't pretend to be something else. It's just, you put a fallback somewhere and it's there for very key interactions. It doesn't interfere with your DOM, it's out there. Once you're hydrated, it's gone because of bubbles. You don't have to do if hydrated in all kinds of places. So use bubbling for key interactions as pre-hydration fallback. I wouldn't use it for this. This is a sortable table of kids. We have the name and we have the age. And we want that beautiful button of the two arrows from Unicode to sort ascending or descending by name or by age. It's not fun to do that with vanilla bubbles. And there is no, it would also change the order of your DOM, which might mess up your virtual DOM. So this is usually how I would do it in React. We have an on-click, seems familiar. Usually the kids would come from some store. Here it's Redux. If it's my code, it would probably be something related to Xstate. I really recommend to talk about Xstate. I used it in production, it's great. But you usually use some store for the kids, and then you have a sort by state, and the sorted kids would be a use memo based on the two of them. So sort button wouldn't work until hydration. Not fun for users. You got used to me saying this. So for this, we're going to use the third principle, which is blocks versus widgets. Now this is how I would do some things like a table widget. This is a custom element. But I still use React. I have the kids table, and I still use a selector from my store, etc. But the sortable table itself is a custom element, which has a sorting functionality, kind of in a generic way. So I separate the UI from the app, and I bundle this separately. I don't bundle it with everything that knows everything about my app with all the fetches. And I don't know what else takes you a long time to render. Probably a whole bunch of A/B testing directives, your Google Analytics, everything about your app. So this is just a small thing that does table sorting, and I take that bit out to be in a web component. Wait, what? I mean, this is a React conference, and you're telling us to switch to web components, traitor, or we love React. It's the best way to hire people, and it's our strategy. We're not going to switch it. So no, I'm telling you, please use the right tool for the right job. Don't use a microscope to look at stars. Don't use a telescope to check a COVID test if it's something. So I'm saying use a microscope, use web components for building blocks, and use a telescope, the React, for the app widgets. If you think about it, that's what React is good at. Let's use React for what it's good at. React is good for synchronizing your app model, your app state, with your DOM. That's what it's great at. Use it for that. How do we know which is which? These are examples of UI building blocks. Date picker, sortable table, pagination, text auto adjust. You can imagine all of these to be part of the web platform in a way. Like date picker, you have one in the web platform. Maybe you want your own because it doesn't suit your needs. That's fine. But all of these are generics. They're not specific in any way to what you're building. So even if you decide to build it specifically, this is a UI building blocks and treat it like that. Maybe connecting it with the whole virtual DOM of React is not the right thing. Maybe it is. What are app widgets? Your app's dashboard, your login flow, your app's navigation menu, all the stuff that connected to your store, to your model, that only you can know about, that you will never reuse in another app, maybe that you will never put in some web component repository out there, that the web platform will never write your dashboard for you. You know that. Oh, this was supposed to be a backtick. When I was at Wix, we did this with something called a Wix image. It's an image that changes the URL if it's resized. It's something we wanted the experience to happen before hydration. So we switched that to be a custom element. Today, this is the custom element that is used in the highest number of websites in the world, thanks to the scale of Wix, of course, and it's generating a lot of domains. But that's usually how web components are used today, not as a strategy to build your site, but as a way to make some interactions fast and durable. So blocks, use web components for your UI blocks and React for app widgets. Also some UI blocks, some app widgets, it's all good. Also the nice thing about it is that you lose the disadvantages of web components, which is that the shadow DOM is really difficult and has issues. If you use it for the small things and then reuse it in React, you don't have that problem. The shadow DOM is something small, internal in all kinds of places. It's not like you're trying to render your whole app inside some shadow DOM. So, principles and techniques. Learn to spot which part of your code will only be interactive after iteration. You saw several examples of it that all kind of looks the same. Bauhaus, use HTML and CSS reactivity, form validation, read MDN, be curious, be playful. Bubbles, use bubbles in event as a fallback, and blocks, use web components for UI building blocks. And now it's a coffee break. Don't forget to hydrate. Thank you very much.